Powered by Rep Media in partnership with TSN, it is season 6 of the Ray and Dregs Hockey Podcast, presented by your title sponsor, Tim Hortons. Hey, the cool new flavors of spring and summer have arrived at Tim's. This year's lineup of delicious and refreshing cold beverages includes the brand new lineup of Tim Hortons frozen quenchers flavors, Ray. You've got orange tangerine, blackberry yuzu, peach is popular, strawberry watermelon, and the new pineapple dragon fruit. And also backed by popular demand, the Oreo double stuffed ice cap. All refreshing, delicious, frozen quenchers. Wonderful stuff. Mm-hmm. All right. We get to the end of the regular season. We're yes. 82 games, we're through it, okay? And I don't travel nearly as much as you, so I'm going to make an assumption that the emotions collide a little bit for the traveling analyst, right? So you're like, whew, man, just got through another regular season marathon. And then you look up and you go, here come the playoffs. And as excited as you are, because, you know, first of all, you're a hockey fan and you love what you do, the reality also clicks, doesn't it? Right? Yeah, we just went through months and months of regular season hockey, and now they're just going to grind me into submission for the next couple of months before they hand out the Stanley Cup.
There is a balance, right? It's the best time. It's the most important games. It's the most fun. And when I was at TSN, you used to get assigned a series, and that would be the series you follow. ESPN doesn't do that because they split the national contract with TNT. So because of the NBA and the NFL draft and other things that go on for both TNT, well, the draft's at ESPN, but at TNT, they have the NBA and as do ESPN. Yeah. So we get games on Sunday, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday. They get games on Thursday, Friday, Saturday. So you never get the same series. So in the first 6 days, because I have a couple of flights that have connections, because I got to go way to the east there and back. So I've got 7 flights in the next 6 days, and so I'm in New Jersey and I got to look at it. New Jersey and Carolina on Sunday, Montreal at Washington on Monday, Florida at Tampa on Tuesday, and Montreal at Washington on Wednesday, and then I come home for 3 days, and then I go back out. So there is yesterday was spent a little bit with travel, and it's everybody always seems to be a little nervous I'm going to end up in the wrong city, but I think I got it all right.
Thank God for technology, though, right? Yeah, you know, modern technology. At least you can watch the games or keep in tune with what's going on.
Well, one of the Carolina games in the afternoon, and always the toughest game of any series is the first one you do, because really after the first game, whatever happened like in February doesn't matter anymore, right? It's just about what happened in the first game and who adjusted and how did they change things. And it's the first game's a challenge always, but it's always so fun. Like there's so much energy and excitement. And, you know, so we open up in Carolina, and that's always a really rambunctious place. And it'll be a super fast series. I don't think a lot of goals. We'll get into all this, but then I'm really looking forward to watching Montreal and Washington. And
of course,
I think, you know, Montreal's been out for a while, and when a young team pops in for the first time, there's always lots of excitement and uncertainty around them. So it'll be a good first week, and then we'll see where we go from there.
Okay, well, in the next 30 minutes, we'll march through the playoff matchups, right? And we'll get as in depth as time allows. But before we do that, Ray, and we're not going to dwell on the negative, but there's plenty of changes coming, you know, likely from some of the clubs that did not qualify for the postseason. So as those stories happen, we'll react, we'll analyze. But I'm looking at New York, the Rangers, that is, Boston, maybe Nashville season. Detroit didn't make it again. The Islanders. Seattle thought that they were poised for a step. Pick a team or two. Is it clearly the New York Rangers as the absolute non-playoff shocker, or are there others that you're looking in that mark and going, something's got to give here before they drop puck on next regular season?
Well, I think we forget how long the season is, and you forget into last year and, how quickly things change. The Rangers won the President's Trophy last year. They're not in the playoffs this year. Like, but they made significant change during the season. Most of it did not seem to catch. JT Miller was and will be a solid addition for them. Like he's going to do what he does. He's a good player. But they just seemed aimless for a lot of the season. And I think that it's one thing to lose games and you go, we weren't just quite good enough, or we didn't have this, or we could have used that. When the team is aimless, and then you've got. I would be very surprised if New York doesn't make significant change.
Agreed.
Boston, yeah. I think Boston most certainly will have a permanent head coach. I think Joe Sacco did a pretty decent job with a team that got stripped right away from him. But I think there's a new coach coming there for sure. Here's the thing about the change, and we change quite frequently. It's just not that easy to do. How many times do we hear an analyst of some sort say, they need to do this and they need to do that? They know that. The teams know that. They don't either have the assets to make the deal. Free agency is going to be really interesting with the money available in the system. Like Nick Dowd just got $3 million. He's a fourth line center. I think he's one of the best fourth line centers in the game. Yeah. But does that make the market for fourth line centers $3 million? Because if it does, a lot of teams don't want to pay that. And just because the money's available, how do teams spend it? So this is going to be for a free agent class that isn't great this year. But I would say those are where I see the biggest changes coming.
All right. Well, let's get into each series, and we'll start in the East because that's where our focus has been for the non-playoff teams. And the Battle of Ontario. Okay, so Toronto-Ottawa begins on Sunday. I don't like. There's a rivalry that's natural. It's geographic. We can appreciate that. You're not going to see the Darcy Tucker flying into the Ottawa bench days, I don't think, but there'll be
shame,
layers.
Isn't it? It's a shame.
It kind of is. Well, I mean, you do have Brady Tkachuk, and you do have some elements there that it's going to be intense, high octane. Tempers are going to flare. I get all that, but is it as simple as this? Matthews, Marner, Nylander, Tavares, maybe throw Matthew Knies in the mix. They deliver to the level of their capability, and the Toronto Maple Leafs win this series.
Yes. I think it's quite possible that Ullmark's the best goalie in the series. I think he's really good. But Toronto's goaltending has more than held their own this year. I think Toronto's defense, we've talked a lot about it all year, and there is size and experience there. And then you get up front, and I came across a number with the guys you actually mentioned, and you add Bobby McMahon to that too. But Marner, Nylander, Tavares, Knies, Matthew, McMahon score 72% of their goals. And if they play like I think they're going to play, I think that's a place that Ottawa can't match. Here's the thing. So I do think experience matters. And for a lot of Ottawa's players, it's all going to be new for them. And the guys I think of in particular are Stützle and Jake Sanderson. I think Jake Sanderson's had an amazing year. And I think Stützle's a really, really good player. But this will be new for them, and it'll be different. But I think inexperience matters early in a series. And if you start on the road like they do, it's probably okay that you run away a little at inexperience in the first couple of games. I think it's a hard series. I think it's a physical series. As much as Ottawa wants to make it that way, I think Toronto's more equipped to play that way, like internally. Yeah, they've made changes, but I think they're just it's got to be their time to win this series. I have Toronto in 6 games, and I think the Battle of Ontario is great and all that, but when you're talking about Tucker and those guys, like that was 20 years ago, right? There is no battle until they get back at it. Then it'll perk up in a hurry. But I have Toronto in this series in 6.
Yeah, I agree. I think that's a fair prediction. All right, Montreal, Washington. So that series begins Monday in Washington. The Canadians, man, just an all-around great story, haven't they been? Really I say coming out of the Four Nations break. And I think Marty St. Louis acknowledged that they felt like they had like a 2% chance of finding their way to the playoffs. And he's like, but, I looked at it as that's a chance. Well, have they made the most of that in earning their wild card invite? A lot of confidence in that Montreal Canadiens lineup. But is that enough?
No, I don't think it's going to be. Now, you've got 2 things to think about when you look at the teams. Montreal comes in, they've been battle tested for months because they've been on the outside looking in, and every game has felt like we got to win, an immediacy to it. Washington's kind of coasted their way in here. Montreal's really healthy. Washington's not. Washington had no expectation last year, kind of like Montreal. It was just a great story to get in. This year, all the expectation is in Washington. It's in Washington. So I think those things are positives for Montreal. When I read that quote about Marty St. Louis saying that, we had a 2% chance of making it, you know why that doesn't bug him? Because he had a 2% chance of making it. Like when he was, player. I'm serious. Like when he was in Calgary, they just cast him aside because at that time, like nobody had players of that size. There's no way he could play. He had no chance except he's in the Hall of Fame. Yeah. And when he started coaching in February of 22, he'd never coached anywhere.
Went from minor hockey.
Like that had no chance of working, except here they are. Like Marty churns positivity. He really does. He churns energy. I think the downfall of Montreal will be in this series is that of course, the inexperience is going to matter. A lot of their players are super young. I think they're one of the youngest teams in the past 20 years to make the playoffs.
Yeah.
They rely a lot on very few players to score.
Right.
And Washington is big and heavy and deep. And I think they kind of just churn the series over eventually. One thing to watch, Lane Hudson tied the rookie defense record for assists.
Yeah.
And like Quinn Hughes last year, he's not going to get a free touch back there. Like Quinn had to endure just like physical punishment all the time because they have the puck all the time. They've got it all the time. And Hudson's, 160 pounds, and this is going to be a real test for him. But I think Montreal's a great story. I hope somehow that I get to be in Montreal for Game 3 because I think I won't be, but it's just going to be amazing there. But I've got Washington in this series, and I've got them in 5 actually. I just think that's just not quite enough there for Montreal, but I hope they play well. I really do. I don't know why. I just hope they do.
Well, and look, this is for another day when the Canadians are no longer in the playoffs. So who knows when that's going to be, but undoubtedly this season is going to fuel ads. They know, to your point, they need more offense. And I expect that Kent Hughes is going to do whatever he can to acquire that in the offseason.
I will say this: that'll be trades more than free agency.
Probably,
they have a pile of picks and a pile of young prospects that are just outside the league. That's part of the rebuild that they went through, And so Hughes is going to get a chance to be really, really aggressive. Last point, Marty St. Louis says he wears 2 ties. He changes them after they lose, like he rotates them. One of them is a blue tie that he borrowed from Brad Richards when they were playing, and he just never returned it. And so,
yeah, but did you see Richards chirp him?
Richie says, maybe I'll get the thing back one of these days. It was awesome.
Yeah, I think both those men can afford to buy different ties. So
they could buy a new cravat at any point.
Yeah. Okay, Battle of Florida opens Tuesday in Tampa Bay, right? Does it simplify in the way that, okay, well, this is just extra time for Matthew Tkachuk to get playoff ready, because that is going to feel like a blockbuster for the defending Stanley Cup champs?
Yeah, there is. I think Florida is an absolute wild card this year because they've had so much injury turmoil. And it's one thing to say, okay, Tkachuk's coming back in game 1 and Ekblad will be back in game 3 and they're going to be the players we remember. But Tkachuk hasn't played since February and Ekblad's missed 20 games by the time he comes back. And what if it takes them a game or two, which it probably will, to find like their A game or as close to it as they have at this point? I just don't know really what to expect from Florida. Tampa quietly has put together a really terrific year. They're first in goals for, third in goals against. Vasilevskiy is back to the top end.
That's a problem. Yeah.
That's a problem because in the past year or so, it's felt like Bobrovsky could outplay Vasilevskiy. I don't know that you can look at that as anyone's advantage. Like, I think Vasilevsky's a difference maker, like Bob was last year.
Yeah.
But Vasilevsky's different this year. Gensel didn't miss a step coming in there. Like that point in Kucherov and Gensel, that's a really dangerous line. Can Florida grind the game enough? I guess we're going to find out. I have Tampa in this series. I have them in 6. And but I just don't have a feel for what Florida's going to be. I don't think Florida's defense is as good as last year, like as a team.
Right.
And a lot of that might be because they played half the year with like 2/3 of their players. Like they've really had a tough go injury wise.
All right. So you touched briefly on Carolina and New Jersey. Start Sunday. Thoughts on the return of Dougie Hamilton to the New Jersey Devils blue line this week, and how much of an influence or difference maker can he be for the Devils against the Canes?
I think he has to be a difference maker. They lost Jonas Siegenthaler and Hamilton at the same time, so that wiped out a whole defense pair. And they tried Nemitz, and then they tried Sean Casey for a bit. And so these guys are just getting their feet wet, and they looked overwhelmed. And so Dougie Hamilton, if he's fully healthy and ready to go, he chews up 20, 21 minutes, like for them, like that. You just put that away. I think a really low scoring series. Carolina's the same team as they've always been. Like they're fast and aggressive, and they just generate shot after shot after shot. I think New Jersey can win the series if Markstrom is significantly better than whoever's in the Carolina goal. Carolina's goaltending always makes me a little uncertain with Freddie Anderson and Kochetkov. Anderson's health is always a question, and Kochetkov's either great or not good at all. Like there's not much middle ground for him. So I have a low scoring series here, and I have Carolina to win it. But I think it's super fast and just not a lot of goals in it.
All right, let's shift to the West race. St. Louis opens Saturday in Winnipeg. Scott O'Neill on the Ray and Dregs podcast earlier in the regular season explained their historic start by saying that the team was flat out just embarrassed after losing to Colorado in 5 games in round 1 last year. Do you feel like, okay, it was a long time ago when we had Arniel on the pod, and he openly talked about that. Can that motivation still be as strong and still fuel you the way that Winnipeg needs to get that fuel going into this series?
Oh, I think so, because I'm sure he's going to bring it up again and reignite the thought of what happened a year ago. Like I thought it was a remarkable thing for him to say early in the year. Like we both, when we hung up, with the interview, we're like, wow, that's really honest. Like you don't hear that type of thing very much. Winnipeg is, I mean, they're really good. They're a good team. They're deep. They're big, and then they run into the hottest team around, and that's St. Louis. And like, this is not an easy series. I have a tough time thinking St. Louis is not going to make this a hellacious series. I really do. I think this one is quietly as competitive as any series. This is one of those ones where I go, you know what, the seeding doesn't matter because of the way the low seed came into the playoffs.
Yeah,
they played like a much higher seed. Late in the year. I've got Winnipeg in 7.
Okay.
Like I think this is a really competitive, physical series. And Robert Thomas is ready to be a star. Like if he isn't already, and I think he's he can be a difference maker. The loss of Holloway really hurts them. He had a fabulous year for them to this point, and taking him out of the lineup. I know they put Snuggerud in there. He's just inching his way into his career, but I think that's a big loss for them.
Yeah, and then look at Ehlers is out week to week in Winnipeg.
Yeah. That's a big loss for them, man. Yeah, right.
Yeah, Velarde isn't quite ready to start. So now you look
where do they think they're going to get him back, Dregs?
Well, he's been skating on his own. He hasn't skated with the team. Perhaps that changes today, but they feel like he needs at least a couple of skates. So
it's funny case, too. Like guys get
maybe,
guys get dropped in now, right? Like during the season, they all have their protocols, and then it's a free skate by themselves, and then a non-contact, and then with the full practice, and now you go from 0 to 100 like today. We need you. Here you go. So those are significant changes for Winnipeg.
All right, Edmonton, LA start their best of 7 on Monday in Los Angeles. Injury questions up front for the Oil, as we know. Matthias Ekholm injured, know that. So again, we're just kind of picking at the analysis of each series here. Pretty obvious though, isn't it? With Matthias Ekholm out, that creates an enormous hole. So Bouchard, Nurse, maybe Jake Wallman, collectively they've got to absorb the loss of Ekholm for an extended period of time. Otherwise, the Oil are going to have big trouble on that back end.
For sure. I would worry, or not worry. I would be concerned, I guess, if I'm watching the Oilers, that one thing that Darnell Nurse tries to do is his job plus Ekholm's job, because he does try to do that. He tries he wants to win. So he thinks I can do more, but sometimes when he tries more, it gets less. Hey, my grandson Enzo just came in here. He just hey, Enzo's here. Hey, Enzo,
fist
how you doing, buddy? How you doing? I'll see you in 2 minutes.
Fired up for the playoffs.
Oh, is he ever? And those are heavy minutes against a big team, right? Like that's a super physical team, LA, and they forecheck hard. And to absorb those minutes is not going to be easy.
No.
It's funny, a lot of the talk became about the forwards and the changes they made over the season, and over the off season, and whether they're going to work or not work. And then you lose Ekholm, and the whole pillar feels a little shaky. Like that's a enormous, significant loss for them. 4 years in a row. I mean, what else do you talk about? Like with these guys, like the series is going to be close, right?
Yeah.
LA wants to play at lower scoring. I'm sure Edmonton would like to get more people offensively involved. You got the big
Yeah.
boys that are the difference makers for Edmonton. The difference is without Ekholm, for me, um, there's no advantage on the blue line or in goal for Edmonton. I think LA at least holds serve in both of those. I picked LA in 7.
Okay.
LA is great at home. They're great at home.
Yeah.
I think they lost
Yeah.
5. Well, the game last night doesn't matter, but I think they lost 5 times up until last night. And so I picked LA in 7 in this series. And it will be, this one's got the potential to be a little nasty too.
Yeah. Well, and that's where you wonder about Evander Kane. I don't expect that he'll be ready for game 1, but he's expected to return early in the series. So is it 2? Is it 3? Whatever. How impactful can he be in that regard? And then you've got Trent Frederick, who really hasn't skated, so he's got to get going at some point. So those are the question marks we talked about.
Yeah, but and Dregs, those were 2 guys that were part of the imaging, the picture that the Oilers were thinking about is like, we're going to be bigger and heavier to handle some of the tougher spots. Kane hasn't played in a year. When guys are out that long, it's like it's a real crapshoot that some guys can come back and do it. Other guys look like they haven't been out or look like they've been out for a year. And Frederick's barely skated. And so his conditioning will be, man, it's an uncertain time in Edmonton for sure.
All right. Colorado Avalanche, Dallas Stars. What a series this is shaping up to be. Game 1 is Saturday in Dallas. So, of course, that means Mikko Rantanen about to face the group that he won a Stanley Cup with.
Unbelievable, isn't it?
Isn't that crazy?
The way it all worked, and he's like, oh, yeah, I know these guys, crazy.
But is that like, is there a distinct advantage to that from his perspective, or is the emotional weirdness of it for him also going to be a factor?
I don't think there's any advantage in it at all. I think it's uncomfortable. I think it's hard to deal with. And the importance of Rantanen was pretty clear in the way that he got traded around, but also without Jason Robertson now, Rantanen, like Robertson, I mean, he left the game on crutches and that's no
didn't
good.
Look good. No.
And so like Dallas came apart at the seams down the stretch. I mean, they lost 7 straight. They gave up 1 million goals, and they don't have Heiskanen and they don't have and Robertson. And so it's not the same series it was 3 weeks ago. Put it that way. It doesn't feel like it to me.
No, I agree.
I'm fascinated with Colorado, what they did. What good teams completely changed their goaltending and their center ice position and trade away one of their best franchise players all in the same year.
But didn't you? I think you sent the note, didn't you? 8 trades and he used 47 players.
Yes,
like come on,
47 players. Like Jared Bednar, a couple times I did because I did a few games there this year. And he'd be like, "Yeah, we got 4 new forwards in." And it's like 4. There's only 12. It's like this is what we. So I think Colorado's going to win this series. I would have picked it as a complete pick 'em, but I think I would have picked Dallas if everybody was healthy. But the fact of the matter is, 2 of their very best players, and Heiskanen and Robertson, are not, and that they've come apart defensively. And I think this is Colorado's series.
TSN did its postseason preview show after the Leafs regional game Thursday night. A lot of love for the Vegas Golden Knights, right? And I know, how can you be surprised by that? You can't be. So Vegas hosts Minnesota. I mean, we can go on and on and on. Like, Vegas is one of those teams that is so strong, that has so much depth that you could easily envision, with all due respect to Winnipeg, to Colorado, to Dallas, go down the list. I mean, you could easily envision the Vegas Golden Knights back in the Stanley Cup final.
I do in my predictions and my guesses. I just think they are so well put together for all the things that you mentioned. Hill has shown in goal that he's good enough. I mean, he's already won. Their defense. I did the last game of the year for them in Vancouver here, and in the second period, so Vegas, or yeah, in the second period, first period, Vegas
Mm-hmm.
defends, and their defense is down at the end, at the far end,
Right.
right? And so in the second period, when they switch, um, Vegas defends the net where the defense sit right next to me, and they're like a freaking eclipse. They all stand up. You can't see down at that end of the like they're all enormous. I think they defend so well. And we talked a little bit about like early on, and it'll be just a question about Lane Hudson forever because of his size. Can he absorb the punishment, right? Like, because everybody has to absorb extra in the playoffs because the way the game is. Vegas's team, their team is built to absorb that. And the guys that they had, like, Dorofeyev got 35 goals.
Yeah.
Like, he's a
Pretty
legit scorer. Jack Eichel's going to be. We talked about this, but he's on my MVP ballot. He's on my Selke ballot. I mean, if I were voting, that those would be he would be in two places. He'd be on my Lady Bing ballot too. I think he's had his best overall season. I think he's been
really good,
phenomenal. Their power play is a machine. It is so good, and Minnesota kills penalties terribly. Yeah. It's not a good mix for them. I think this is Minnesota hung in there through a really lousy stretch of injuries. They make the playoffs. I think Vegas wins this series, and Minnesota goes into the offseason for the first time in a long time with buckets of cap space. And of course, I got to get Kaprizov signed, but they're like they feel like they're on the way to better days, to get out of the mushy middle of the league, but it's not right now.
All right, we'll wrap up the Tim Hortons headlines with you've given series predictions all the way. I think that the Western Conference Final will be Winnipeg versus Vegas, and I think the Eastern Conference Final, just the way the bracket shakes down, could be Toronto and Carolina, which puts together an all-Canadian final of Toronto-Winnipeg for me. And I think the Winnipeg Jets are going to win the Stanley Cup. How about you?
Wow.
Take us through the predictions.
I think Vegas, Colorado.
Nice.
Vegas wins that. I think Toronto, Washington. I don't know who wins that. Do I have to pick somebody? Like, I'm kind of stuck.
No, because I know where you're going with your Stanley Cup champion. So I think showed your hand a bit.
I'm gonna pick somebody, and it's not gonna matter because I'm gonna pick Vegas to win the Stanley Cup. I don't know why. I've been alive since the Leafs have not won, and I don't know why I think the Leafs are going to get to the Stanley Cup. I think they're going to win the East, but I wouldn't be shocked if Washington does. I think people have soured on. I think people have soured on Washington so much over the last little bit, and I haven't. I just think I think they're a very, very good team. That series is a toss-up, but I'm going to take Vegas to win the Cup.
Beautiful. Well, those are your headlines. Thank you to our good friends at Tim Hortons. We'll dive back into the playoff edition of Ask Ray and Dregs Anything, brought to you by Akon, next week at some point when we figure out what our travel schedules are and all of that.
You know what else will happen, though, Dregs? You know what else will happen? It'll let Rashog's haircut grow out a little bit because, you know what they say, the difference between a good and a bad haircut, 2 weeks. So he's right in that stage.
Why don't we wrap up the episode with a fun fact? And I thought you would appreciate this as an alumnus of the Brandon Wheat Kings.
Okay.
You ready? We just talked about Vegas. Kelly McCrimmon, the general manager.
Yep.
Former coach, GM, owner of the Brandon Wheat Kings.
Yes.
The Vegas
Yes,
Golden Knights finish first in the Pacific Division. Winnipeg Jets, Craig Heisinger, Kevin Zinger. Yeah, good people. Good people. Yep. Great Brandon Wheat Kings.
Yep.
The Jets win the President's Trophy. And third, last but not least, Brad Treliving, former Brandon Wheat King, general manager of the Toronto Maple Leafs, finished first in the Atlantic Division. A lot of love in the front office for the Brandon Wheat. Coincidence, Ray? I don't think so. Smart people graduate from the Brandon Wheat Kings of the Western Hockey League.
You know what? The one thing there, if we talk about Chevy and Brad Treliving, and Kelly McCrimmon, there's one commonality to that too, besides the fact that they all went through Brandon. The puck was not their friend. All three of them.
Wow. Do you remember Tree as a player?
No, but I'll tell you, when he tells stories about his playing career, it's amazing. It's amazing. As you might suspect, it was a rather straightforward game for Tree.
and Chevy, as we remember, I mean, he was a first-round draft pick of the New York Islanders, and people don't realize he was a tough dude. Lefty, southpaw, man. I remember one time, captain the Brandon Wheat Kings got into a fight. I think it was against Lethbridge, Medicine Hat. Doesn't matter. One punched this guy and just stood in front of the Teeps bench, and literally he's like, "Who's next? Let's go."
Yeah. I guess that fella didn't understand that he was left-handed. Bad time to find out.
And Kelly was, an ornery type of player as well, which would be shocking to no one who watched the late great Brad McCrimmon just torture players like you during his day as a.
I would have thought, like, on the farm there, did the McCrimmons have like when you have those.
They ate nails for breakfast. That's what they did, right?
You know the stand-up like punching things, like the punching stations. They had that, and they just had a target like right above somebody's waist, and they just practiced their cross checks. Cross check. Those guys were. Brad was brutal. So good luck to all 16 teams, and I know we're in for a great playoff, and I look forward to get going. Lucky to be part of it, and hope everybody has a enjoyable Easter weekend if you celebrate, and enjoy the weather and enjoy the playoffs. And we'll get to it next week.
Yeah. Same to you, Raymond. Happy Easter. And a lot of fun coming our way here on the Ray and Dregs Hockey Podcast, and we'll report back to you with our next episode at some point early next week with all the games going on. All right. Thank you to our sponsors who continue to support Ray and Dregs, make this pod possible. Our title sponsor, Tim Hortons, and thank you to Ekholm. Until next time, enjoy the playoffs and stay safe, everybody.